my screen.
Okay. Good morning, Jennifer. Well, they just keep streaming in.
It's a beautiful morning.
Let's see. Oh, blue skies.
Yes, it's my husband and I were for a run this morning and it was just perfect.
Oh, good for you. Okay.
So we'll get started in, is it 1 minute?
We have 1 minute. Yep.
Okay.
Oh, now might be a good time to say if you could mute your mic, that would be appreciated. Of course, unmute if you'd like to ask a question, or you can use the chat feature as well. I will do my best to manage that chat as we are going through the slide deck. I never know where to look. I find I'm looking at my little icons on the side, but then it looks like I'm looking off to the side. Goodness.
Okay, well, I think, are we good to get started then?
Yeah, let's go ahead.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Emily Dixon, and I'm the principal at Bezanquet Central Public School. And Kaylee Evans, that you also hear and see, is the principal at London Road School. And we have presenting our presentation on Google Meet. We do not profess to be experts. However, we are more than happy to share our learning and some of the tips and tricks that we've learned along the way. Just like you, we are at home working, and so there may be some, we both have kids and other things going on, so there might be some activity behind us. Please just ignore it, and hopefully we can get through this just fine this morning. We acknowledge that the land on which we are gathered is part of the traditional territory of the Chippewa, Ottawa, Potawatomi, and Delaware nations. Okay, Kaylee.
Okay, so all the learning that we have been doing, or we will be doing this week, is guided by these 6 remote learning guidelines. And Emily, as I learned yesterday, they're going to explain them on the next slide, so let's keep going. So asynchronous learning means, and this was a new word for me, I keep telling people, asynchronous learning means that it's not online in real time all day. Instead, the learning can be completed flexibly. I can't see. It's flexible is what that means. So you're not creating or an environment that your students are going to be there from 9 till 3 every day, but simply checking in at times. The next one is the pace. So it's important when we are considering the learning that we are going to be providing our students with, that we take into account the fact that the learning can take 2 to 3 times longer than it would in the classroom. We all know when students are working by themselves, there is a longer lag period for them to complete their work. Prioritize, so identify the learning that is most needed. So you all know in your classrooms where you kind of left off and where your next plan was that you were going, and really prioritize. This isn't the time to hit every expectation, but really chunking those curriculum guidelines together. The 4th one is being available. I asked my own staff to set up office hours, and we shared that with our school community as to when they would be available every day. and how they would like to be reached during that time. So whether it be on Google Meet or via Google Classroom or email, and then how the parents could contact them. So providing them their email address and a phone number if that was something that they wanted. Your learning needs to be intentional. So really capitalizing, and again, that goes with the prioritize, really choosing intentional learning tasks for your students during this time. And familiar. This one I think is really important as we are learning about Seesaw and the Google Suites this week. I know at times it can be overwhelming when we're looking at all these new tools. So if it's overwhelming for us, it is likely overwhelming for our students and their parents to learn these new tools. So to go slowly and pick and choose, and let's not overwhelm them with, for example, with say the entire Google Suites all at once, but really taking our time and introducing things slowly. We are hopeful that you will introduce Google Meets because it can be a great tool. Okay. These are just a little shout out for the other sessions that are happening. So our session is the same session every day, but the other sessions build on each other. So for example, if you attended New to Seesaw Part A yesterday, no, let's not use that one as an example because it's running at the same time as we are. So if you were currently using Seesaw Part A yesterday, then you would want to attend Part B today and then Part C tomorrow. It's important because they are going to build on each other. Also important to note that these sessions are being recorded so you can refer back to them. Okay, excuse me. And then there's the Google sessions as well.
Okay, I am going to take over the presentation now. Thanks, Kaylee. Those are the guidelines that we're reminding all staff to adhere to through this unprecedented time as we endeavor to help our students with their remote learning. One of the tools that the board is supporting if you would like to conference with your students is Google Meet. And so you can access Google Meet through your LKDSB.com, logging onto your Google. And you can see the waffle in the top right hand once you are once you've logged on to Google. And Google Meet looks like this right here. And there are a few ways that you can start your meeting. We've kind of narrowed it down to 3 essential ways. The first being the more simple, that if you just have a one-time meeting, and the third being more complex, where we recommend if you're having regular reoccurring meetings, you can do this third option. So a first way to start a meeting is by simply clicking on the Google Meet icon, and you can join you would start a meeting, you would click on that bar, and you can name your meeting. Here you will receive a prompt, and I recommend you need to allow microphone and video access for this tool. The next prompt would be to add people. So it's here that you would add your students using their @lkdsb.com email. If you have students that only have access to a phone, you can also call them into the meeting. So when you click on add people, you can see there are 2 options over here. Invite is how you would do the email invitations, and call is where you would put in their phone number, and it actually calls out, and they would just answer the call and be added to the meeting through audio. One thing I want to point out here, you will see over here on this screen, it says dial in. Do not have students or any colleagues call into the meeting using this dial in with a PIN, because long distance charges will it be incurred. So we want to make sure people know that if you call them into the meeting, they will not receive any long distance charges. So that's something important to keep in mind. The second way that you can invite people to the meeting is by using the link that you will find at the startup screen. So on the red arrow here would be the link that you would copy and paste and put into an email, for example. So you just need to remember that you also need to access the meeting using the same link. So if you do send the link out into an email, you would have to go into your sent email folder to access the meeting through the exact same link, because every time you enter Google Meet and you open a new tab, this provides a new meeting link. So that's just something important to keep in mind. I know that, for example, Kaylee with the staff at London Road, she uses the same link over and over for her meetings. So that is one way that you could do it. And just making sure, again, that everybody's accessing through the same link. The third way that you can start a Google Meet meeting, a video conference, is a little bit more complicated to get set up. However, I would strongly recommend this way if you do end up having regular meetings with your students. So you would first create a Google group. So this slide, or this picture right here, illustrates when you click on the Google Groups icon in the waffle. You create your group, and here you would add all of your students that you want to be in that group, where you would be regularly inviting them to a meeting. The trick here is that they need to accept to join in the group before they would gain access to your invitations. So this is a one-time step that they would receive an invitation to their .com email, and they would just have to accept to be part of the group. And then you'll be able to see who has accepted membership into this group. And once they've done that, you would then go into Google Calendar. And I recognize that this slide is very wordy. I just wanted to make sure that we had record of the step-by-step process. So I'll just kind of talk through this. So again, this is assuming all of your students have accepted membership into the Google group that you've created. Then you would go into Google Calendar. Again, it's an icon in the waffle in the G Suites. And you would find this slide here, or this screen here. And you would first add a title, whether it's your class meeting. And then in the Add Guests tab, that's where you would add the name of the group that you just created. For example, I would just type in Bazanquet staff, and then that would invite all of the members of the Google group that you've just created. When you click on Add Location or Conferencing, you'll click on Add Conferencing, and that creates the link to your Google Meet meeting. And then you would click to save that link. Then the invitations are sent. They're sent to your students.com email as well. This is saved as an event in your Google Calendar. So when the time comes for your meeting, you would just have to go into your Google Calendar and click on the link in your calendar. You just have to watch that everyone has accepted that invitation. It's also kind of nice because when you send the invitation out, it gives them an option to accept invitation to the meeting or not. So you can see who is intending to show up. And I did have someone kind of help me through the first time I had a staff meeting using Google Meet. I had someone in our group chat helping troubleshoot the people getting into the meeting, which took about 10 minutes. We had to make sure people had joined the Google group, and then they're accessing the proper link. So I do recommend having a means of communication set up that you can help troubleshoot some of the students that are having trouble accessing or entering the meeting. but I have had 4 virtual staff meetings, and now it's very slick, and we've had very few connection issues. A couple times the staff member that we call on, we invite to the meeting through her telephone number, we were disconnected. And again, it's important that you tell any students that are connecting via phone that you will call them back. So they'll need to make sure that they indicate to you that they've been dropped from the meeting, and then you need to call them back, because if they call in, they'll have some long distance charges.
Emily, can I pause you there and we'll just address some of the questions in the chat? I've been trying to type them out, but I just want to make sure that we're clear. So there are several ways, as Emily just went through, to invite students to a Google Meet. You are going to find the one that works best for you. I just wanted to make sure that everyone knows with our youngest students, or if you're using the Seesaw platform, you can copy and paste that link. The first, you can copy and paste the link that comes up right into Seesaw, and then parents can click on that and follow that. And that would negate students needing to know their Google address, their Gmail address rather, and their password. I know for some of our younger friends, that one's tricky. I set my own son up, who's in grade 2, yesterday, and he was like, what's a password? Not helpful. So the Google Suite has also been endorsed by the LKDSB. Because you are creating an event and inviting participants with a link, it is a more secure platform than Zoom is. I know there's been some issues with Zoom. And yes, you could, well, Janet, I wouldn't recommend texting directly with your students, but if you have a Google Classroom, you could post the link there, or you could send the link to their parents. And then Jana says, number 3 is the most front loading, but in the end is easier to navigate. So I would just say that creating the event through the Google Calendar, yes, it's definitely the most front loading, very easy to navigate if your students are savvy with the Google Calendar and can add the groups. If you're teaching, for example, grade 2, maybe not the route to go, right? Derek, again, yeah, Google Meet is fine for our purposes, okay? Okay, I think we're caught up, sorry.
Okay, great, thank you. When you invite your students through the Google Calendar, creating an event, this is what their invitation will look like. So I just kind of wanted to show you what they would receive. And in the red circle is the link that they would just click on to gain access to the meeting. And they're automatically connected. And like I said, it's pretty slick once you get started. Okay, Kaylee.
Okay, so we just have a few tips. You want to encourage your students to keep the chat feature on. So the chat is that little box off to the right-hand side of your screen beside the people icon. When it's enabled, it turns green. Okay, that allows the chat to continue. And that would be a good place for your students to post greetings to each other for your first meeting. The next tip is that the screens can look differently depending on what you are doing with them. The setup can be different. So there's the example of the large video with the tiles off to the side, and then there's the 4 square tiles. Important to note that the person who is speaking the most, or who is speaking, will be highlighted at the time, or will be the big screen as well. Yeah. You can change the layout, and I should mention maybe at this point to clarify that we are having our Google Meet information session in Zoom. So the feature that we are discussing right now, you can't try out on your computer because we are currently in Zoom. The reason we are using Zoom is because we have the wonderful Rod for support, which is necessary when we have such large groups. However, when you do try out Meet, and Emily and I would be happy to have a meet with you if you would like to try that out, Emily or I. To change the layout, if you take your cursor and kind of hover over the bottom of the screen, a white bar appears, and there is 3 dots at the bottom right corner that will change the layouts. Okay. That white bar is also where you are going to go to mute, to show your video, or turn your video on or off rather, as well as hang up the phone call or the meet. Okay, so you can present what is on your screen to the participants in your meet by, again, taking your cursor and hovering it over the bottom so that the white bar appears. And then there is a square with an arrow, and that is where you will go to present your screen. This is particularly helpful if you're using it for your students. I can see if you were to, if you were doing a lesson this way, maybe a guided reading lesson that you wanted to show some of the text features to, so you could put your book, or you could have it on your screen and then share it that way. Sorry, I'm just distracted by the chat. Darlene is asking if there's a whiteboard feature built in. Does Google Meet have a similar feature? No. I don't believe Google Meet has a whiteboard feature. However, if you enable the chat, then they could ask their questions in the chat while you are presenting your screen or your content. And then Tina is asking about grade 1 students. It would be easier to send a link on Seesaw to avoid the .com email and passwords, correct? Tina, that is completely personal preference. However, yes, it is an option to send the link directly on Seesaw for parents to access Google Meets just through their, just through Google, right? So if you're just opening a search engine and then that little waffle or the array appears in the corner, and you can click on the Google Meet icon there and then follow the link there. Okay, all right, next. So Google has some really great help features, and you can get help right in the meeting. So you would just type in Google Meet help and then describe the problem that you are having. I would say though that I've had 3 staff meetings now, and it just gets easier every time, and there hasn't seemed to be really any issues. The one issue that we do seem to keep having is people don't mute their mics, and the background noise makes it really, really hard to concentrate on what is talking or who is talking. For example, just even the rustling of papers as you're moving stuff around comes up really clearly. So that is an ongoing issue for us. Danielle, hi Danielle, is asking, is there a way to log on as an administrator so the chat is completely shut down and can't be rejoined after students after you've closed everything down? So you would want to be the last person to log out of your Meet to ensure that there's no one else there. But that being said, they could use that same code to open their own Meet again.
Yeah, and students have always, any student in the LKDSB, they do have access to Google Hangout and can conference with each other or chat with each other. This is a feature within the G Suite. We had this question yesterday. And so I just think you can talk with your administrator, but I think best practice, like Kaylee was saying, is, you know, set the norms that and the expectations that you want in your meeting, and say everyone needs to log out and you're the last one to log out, so that you can say you followed that process. I mean, there could the potential for students to continue, like rejoin or set up their own Google Hangout is there, but you are mitigating, you're setting precedent and mitigating that by saying you're the last one out of there, and then obviously report any concerns to your administrator.
Yeah, thanks, Emily. I would also say that during this time, our students are missing each other, right? So the chance for them to connect is not horrible, because they're missing that social time, right? The school is, as we all know, is so much more than just curriculum. They are going to want to meet with each other. And the nice thing about Google Meets is that it does provide a safe place for students to interact because no one else has that code, right? You're creating the invitation for your students. So just going back to the chat, Bailey asks if students are able to create their own Meet. Yes, they could. They've always been able to create their own Meet because that feature is in Google. So this, and you know what, likely, they probably have been. This will not be new to them. I mean, it's brand new to us, but likely not to them. A question about, I can't make out that name, I'm sorry. Armella, can you mute the students? So yes, you can mute the students. However, you can't unmute them. So they have to unmute themselves, which if they can't find the bar at the bottom, can be tricky. I had that happen with a staff member. I muted him I was trying to be funny and it wasn't really funny. But I muted him and then we couldn't unmute him and he couldn't find the bar at the bottom. So it took about 7 minutes actually until he was able to rejoin the meeting. But yes, you can mute them. And then we have a troubleshooting question. Okay, so Martha says that she tried this yesterday and she shared her screen, but the sound on the video could not be heard. There was a small red circle with a speaker and a line through it.
Oh yes, I see it at the top. This one, is that the one?
We can't see that.
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's just under when you have a shared screen, it's when you hover over the top, I see what she's referring to. So mine right now is a circle with a red dot, but there's no line through it. So it must have been something that was activated on your screen. And so whenever I had trouble in the Google Meet, I did go to the help, and I would just the screens or the slides that I showed you here are help that I actually screenshotted because these are things that I searched for. I had a question about bandwidth and supporting operating systems. So that would be my suggestion. Even if you're in the meeting, you can maybe do a quick search.
Perfect. Thanks, Emily. Another question, would we recommend letting the students or parents know that they can access Meet together or talk to your admin? Barbara, I would talk to your admin about that just to make sure that you guys are on the same page first. However, it is a great space for students. Donna, I agree, they will be over the moon. As a staff, we were over the moon to see each other. It was so nice just to make that contact with each other. Bailey, I would perhaps, I don't know what grade you teach, but the question is, should we be encouraging parents to supervise their child when using Google Meet? I would encourage parents to supervise their children whenever they're using technology. However, we do know that it is a very tricky time for parents. Parents are still working, parents are working from home. I mean, my own children are being sadly neglected out in the living room at the moment. So that supervision isn't always possible, but definitely let them know what you are doing. And maybe even invite them to the first Meet so they can see what's going on depending on the age of your students. Wendy, can you have, well, Emily, this is a question for you. So Wendy, okay. Can you have 2 teacher owners of the Google group like on Classroom?
2 teacher owners. I believe so. I'm just trying to think of that initial screen. So within Google Group, so once you create the group, there is some like a little toolbar on the right top hand of the screen, and one is manage group. So I think if you added a member and then gave them admin privileges in that manage group aspect, you would be able to. Another thing you bring up, a good thing for me to remind people, you can manage your group so that it's private. So outside being other people in the LKDSB can't join your group. And all of that is within that Google Group creation home screen.
Awesome. Thanks. So important, we didn't really cover this yesterday, Emily, but I think it's important to remember that when you're using Google Meet, that you need to be setting the norms for your students and the expectations for your students, just like you would in the classroom, right? So this is not a free-for-all space. It is a space for collaboration and to see each other. But really, there needs to be some rules set as well, just like you would in your classroom. I think we can all be, we are all nervous when using technology with our students because we don't know where it's going to go, and often they are, like I said, are more capable than we are, and it can go off rails really quickly, but you are still the teacher in that space, and you are the one who is setting the expectations. Okay, so we would love if you would complete this feedback. Let us know what and how we can improve this session. The session is the same tomorrow, but we will take your feedback into account. And if you have any questions or would like to try out a Meet, please don't hesitate to reach out to Emily or to myself, and we would be happy to kind of guide you through the process. Oh, and a little shout out, sorry.
Sorry.
No, go ahead, Emily.
I was just going to say all of these sessions are being recorded and will be posted on the blog spot. So that's there for your reference. But yeah, yesterday after our session, both Kaylee and I got some great questions, and so never hesitate to reach out to us.
Emily and Kaylee, thank you so much. This is so helpful to figure out how to use the different tools, and I really appreciate everybody stopping in as we work in a time that we are trying to figure a lot of things out. We appreciate everybody's openness and willingness to continue to partner and try to figure that out. And certainly we need great LKDSB folks to do that. And so that's certainly Kaylee and Emily. We appreciate them stepping into this role and supporting our everyone that way. So thank you so much. We really appreciate everybody's time today.
Our pleasure. And we would like to thank Rod.
Yeah,
Yes.
and Rod in the background.
Thanks, Rod.
You're welcome.